The rain hammered the windshield like 1,000 accusations, each drop accusing me of running away again. I slammed the Uber app open on my phone, fingers slick with regret, and punched in my ex's address, because showing up uninvited at 2 a.m. in Brooklyn was the kind of masochistic bullshit I'd become expert at. "Pick me up now," I muttered to the screen, as if it could hear the crack in my voice, the one that said I'd lost the only man who'd ever seen through my armor. The car pulled up curbside on Flatbush Avenue, a nondescript black Toyota Camry that looked as tired as I felt, its headlights cutting through the downpour like hesitant spotlights. I yanked open the back door, tossing my soaked duffel bag onto the seat, and slid in beside it, not even glancing at the driver until he cleared his throat. "Rough night." His voice was low, gravelly, with that easy Midwestern lilt that made New York feel a little less like a meat grinder. I looked up then, and the world tilted. There, in the rearview mirror, was a face I hadn't seen in 10 years, not since we'd been kids stealing smokes behind the bleachers in that godforsaken Ohio suburb. Blake. My Blake. The one who'd promised we'd run away together the day after graduation. The one whose kiss under the July fireworks had tasted like freedom and forever. But he'd vanished like smoke, leaving me with nothing but a note that said, "I'm sorry, Zach. It's not you, it's everything." "Zachary?" he said, his eyes widening in the mirror, the car idling forgotten as traffic honked behind us. Rain blurred the glass between us, but not the shock, not the pull that had never really let go. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out of this nightmare-turned reunion. "Blake," I whispered, the name tasting like ash and honey on my tongue. 10 years. A decade of wondering if he died in some ditch or just decided I wasn't worth the baggage of 2 scared queer kids from Bible Belt hell. And here he was, in a fucking Uber, ferrying drunks and dreamers through the city that had chewed me up and half spat me out. He twisted in his seat, one hand still on the wheel, the other hovering like he wasn't sure if he should reach back or bolt. Close. He hadn't changed much. Same sharp jaw shadowed with a day's stubble. Same hazel eyes that could shift from stormy to sunlit in a heartbeat. But there were lines around them now, faint etchings of whatever life had carved into him since he'd ghosted me. "Jesus, Zach. It's really you." His voice cracked on my name, and something in me, something I'd buried under layers of one-night stands and therapy bills, cracked right along with it. "Yeah, it's me," I said, forcing a laugh that came out bitter. "The ghost you left haunting that shithole town. What the hell are you doing driving Ubers in Brooklyn? Last I checked, you were gonna conquer Hollywood or some crap." He winced, rubbing the back of his neck, that old habit when he was cornered. "Life's funny that way. Didn't quite pan out like the movies." He glanced at the app on his dash, the ride request blinking insistently. "Your destination, it's still that address in Williamsburg? Jake's place." My stomach twisted. Of course he'd seen it. The app didn't lie, and neither did the fresh bruise on my ego from the fight that had sent me fleeing my own apartment. Jake, with his Wall Street polish and promises of figuring us out, had finally admitted what I'd suspected for months. He wasn't ready for this, for me, for us, for the messy truth of loving a man in a world that still pretended otherwise. "Yeah," I muttered, slumping back. "But you can just drive. Take the long way. I don't give a shit about the fare." Blake nodded, pulling into traffic with a smoothness that spoke of too many late nights on these streets. The wipers thwacked rhythmically, a metronome to the silence stretching between us. I wanted to scream at him, demand why he'd left without a word, why he'd let me think I was unlovable. But the words stuck, tangled in the what-ifs. Instead, I watched the city slide by, neon signs flickering in the rain, yellow cabs splashing through puddles, the Brooklyn Bridge looming like a steel promise in the distance. So, he started after a mile or two, his eyes flicking to the mirror again. You look good, Zach. Grown up. That scruff suits you. There was a warmth in his tone, the kind that used to make my knees weak. But now it just stung, a reminder of what we'd lost. I snorted, running a hand through my damp hair. Thanks. You look like you could use a decent night's sleep. Uber treating you okay? Or is this just your midlife crisis gig? He chuckled, low and genuine, the sound vibrating through the console. A bit of both. Moved here 5 years ago after a lot of detours. Acting didn't stick. Turns out I'm better at listening to sob stories than delivering monologues. Pays the bills, though. Lets me see the city without owning it. I nodded, staring out at the passing brownstones, their windows glowing like judgmental eyes. Must be nice, being the confessional on wheels. Bet you've heard it all. Cheating spouses, bad dates, existential meltdowns. More than my share, he admitted, his grip tightening on the wheel as we hit a red light on Atlantic Avenue. Yours sounds like a fresh one. Want to talk about it? No judgment. Driver-client confidentiality and all that. The light turned green, but I felt exposed, raw under the dashboard glow. Jake's words echoed. I love you, Zach, but this city's killing me. I need space to breathe. Space. As if our shared bed, our Sunday brunches at that hole-in-the-wall diner, weren't enough oxygen. Just the usual, I said finally, voice tight. Guy I thought was the one decides labels are too scary. Turns out, I'm still the punchline to someone else's coming-out story. Blake's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. Fuck that. You're not a punchline, Zach. Never were. He paused, navigating a sharp turn onto a quieter street lined with indie bookstores and coffee shops shuttered for the night. Remember that summer? The one before I left? We snuck into Mr. Hargrove's barn, painted that mural on the wall. Love wins in dripping red letters. You were so damn sure of us. My throat burned. I did remember. The hay scratching our backs as we made love for the first time. The stars peeking through the slats like they were winking at our secret. Yeah. Well, you were the one who bailed. Left me with the paint on my hands and a heart full of questions. He went quiet then, the only sound the hum of the engine and the patter of rain easing to a drizzle. We crossed into Williamsburg, the streets narrowing, hipster bars spilling laughter onto the sidewalks. My phone buzzed, Jake, probably, with some half-assed apology. I silenced it, leaning forward instead. Pull over, I said suddenly. Here. By the park. He obliged without question, easing to the curb near McCarran Park, the empty swings creaking in the wind. The meter ticked on, but neither of us cared. Zach. He cut himself off, killing the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, charged. He turned fully then, his knee brushing mine over the center console. And in that touch, 10 years dissolved. I never stopped thinking about you, he said, eyes locking on mine. Every shitty audition, every dead-end job, it was your face I saw. But I had to go. My dad. He found out about us. The notes, the rumors. Said he'd disown me, cut me off. I was 18, broke, terrified. Thought if I left clean, you'd be free, better off without the drama. Free. The word landed like a slap. Better off? You think ghosting me set me free? I spent years chasing shadows. Blake. Therapy. Hookups. Building walls so high no one could climb them. And now you're here, dropping truth bombs like it's nothing. It's not nothing, he shot back, voice rising with a desperation I'd forgotten he could muster. I came out here to start over, but I never stopped loving you. Saw your name on a theater credit once, off-Broadway, right? Echoes of home. I bought a ticket, sat in the back row, watched you pour your soul out. You were electric, Zach. But I couldn't face you. Not after what I did. The admission hung there, heavy as the humid air seeping in through the cracked window. Electric. That's what the reviews had said, back when I was still pretending stage lights could fill the void. But hearing it from him, cracked something open, a fissure letting in light I'd long ago shuttered. Why now? I whispered, my hand finding his across the divide, fingers intertwining like they remembered the way. Why tell me this in a goddamn Uber? Because life's too short for more regrets, he said, thumb tracing circles on my skin. And because when I saw your name pop up on the app Zachary Ellis, heading to some guy's place at 8 o'clock, I couldn't let you go again. Not without fighting for it. We sat like that, hands clasped, the city pulsing around us oblivious. My phone buzzed again, insistent, but I ignored it. For the first time in forever, the pull toward self-destruction loosened its grip. Blake's secret wasn't just his flight. It was the love he'd carried all these years, a beacon I'd been too blind to see. But as the rain picked up again, drumming a warning on the roof, I wondered if forgiveness was a road we could navigate, or just another dead end. The park lights flickered on, casting golden pools on the wet pavement, and Blake leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. Come with me, he murmured. My shift's almost over. I've got a place in Bushwick, nothing fancy, but it's got a couch and coffee that doesn't taste like regret. I hesitated, Jake's text burning a hole in my pocket. Space. That's what he wanted. Maybe that's what I needed too, with someone who already knew my map. Okay, I said, the word a leap. But no more secrets, Blake. We're adults now. Or at least, we're supposed to be. He smiled then, that crooked grin that had haunted my dreams, and started the car. As we pulled away, the bridge lights blurring into streaks, I felt the first stirrings of something dangerous. Hope. But hope in New York was a fickle bitch, and I had no idea the storm it would unleash. Bushwick unfolded around us like a graffiti mural come to life. Warehouses tagged with vibrant explosions of color, street art whispering stories of rebellion and reinvention. Blake's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up that smelled faintly of curry from the Indian spot downstairs, the kind of place where the walls thrummed with bass from neighboring lofts and the elevator was a myth. He fumbled with his keys, laughing softly when they jangled too loud in the stairwell. Welcome to my castle, he said, pushing the door open to reveal a space that was equal parts chaos and charm. Exposed brick walls lined with dog-eared scripts and Polaroids pinned haphazardly, a sagging leather couch piled with blankets, and a kitchenette where a half-empty bottle of bourbon sat sentinel on the counter. I dropped my bag by the door, the weight of the night settling into my bones. It's You, I said, taking it in. Cozy in that lived-in way that screamed survivor, not yuppie. No Jake-approved minimalism here, just raw edges and the faint scent of sandalwood incense clinging to the air. Make yourself at home, Blake offered, shrugging off his jacket to reveal a faded Ramones tee that hugged his shoulders just right. He moved to the kitchen, pulling 2 mugs from a cabinet that looked like it had seen better decades. Coffee? Or something stronger? You've got that I need to forget my own name vibe. Stronger, I decided, sinking onto the couch. The leather creaked under me, warm from whatever sun had snuck through the fire escape that afternoon. My phone vibrated again. Jake, no doubt spinning his wheels in some polished apology. I powered it off, the screen going dark like a curtain call. Enough encores for one lifetime. Blake poured generous splashes of bourbon, neat, and handed me a mug before settling beside me. Not too close, but close enough that our knees brushed. The first sip burned going down, a liquid fire chasing the chill from my veins. To old ghosts, he toasted, clinking his mug against mine. And maybe laying a few to rest. We drank in silence at first, the kind that's companionable rather than awkward, the rain tapping a soft jazz rhythm on the windowpane. Outside, a siren wailed distant, the city's eternal soundtrack. Tell me about you, he said finally, setting his mug on the scarred coffee table. The last 10 years. The good, the bad, the parts that made you you. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan whirring lazily above. Where to start? The community college dropout who'd clawed his way to off-Broadway via open mics and waitstaff tips? The parade of lovers who'd come and gone like seasons. Intense but fleeting, none quite fitting the shape he'd left? After you left, I began. Voice steady despite the ache. I sold everything that screamed, Ohio boy, and hopped a Greyhound to the city. Landed a gig slinging drinks at this dive in the village, where half the crowd was auditioning for their big break and the other half was nursing grudges older than the barstools. He nodded, listening with that intensity I'd always loved. Elbows on knees, chin propped on laced fingers. Sounds like the start of a song. It was, I admitted, a wry smile tugging my lips. Wrote my first play there, Neon Confessions. Got produced in a black box theater up in Chelsea. That's when I met Marcus, my first real boyfriend post-you. He was a lighting guy, all tats and tattoos of circuit boards. Thought he could fix me, but really, I was just borrowing his stability until I could stand on my own. Blake's expression softened, but there was a shadow in his eyes. Jealousy, regret, and Jake. Jake was safe, I said, the word tasting wrong even as I said it. Investment banker, lives in a loft with exposed beams and a fridge full of kale smoothies. We met at a Pride after-party 2 years ago. He was the guy dancing without a care, pulling me onto the floor when I was nursing a beer in the corner. For a while, it worked. But lately, he's been pulling away, talking mergers and acquisitions like they're metaphors for us. Tonight, he said he needed perspective. Translation. He's eyeing that cute barista at his gym. Fuck perspective, Blake growled, the protectiveness in his tone sending a shiver down my spine. You deserve someone who sees the whole damn canvas, not just the frame. Our eyes met, and the air thickened, charged with the unfinished business of that summer. I set my mug aside, shifting closer. Your turn, Houdini. Where'd you disappear to? Don't spare the gritty details. I want the full director's cut. He exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding that breath for a decade. LA first. Crashed on a cousin's couch in Silver Lake. Waited tables at this vegan joint where everyone was manifesting their Oscars. Landed a few commercials, beer ads. Mostly the ironic kind where the straight guy plays the sensitive type. But the auditions. God, they hollowed me out. Play it straighter, they'd say. Less. You, after 2 years of that, cracked. Packed up and drove east. Ended up in Philly for a stint. That's where I came out to my mom, over the phone, drunk on Natty Light. She cried, but the good kind. Said she'd always known. Just prayed I'd find my way. I reached out, tracing the vein on the back of his hand. A map of roads not taken. And Dad cut me off, like I figured. Mailed back my shit with a note. Pray for guidance. Haven't spoken since. His voice was even, but the hurt lingered. A bruise under the skin. Uber started as a side hustle in the city, flexible hours for auditions that never came. Now, it's my rhythm. People spill their souls in the back seat. And I get to be the guy who listens without charging for therapy. You're good at it, I said softly. Always were. Remember how you'd sit with me after Dad's rages? Just holding space? Like you could absorb the storm. He turned his hand, lacing our fingers. I wanted to be your anchor, Zach. Still do. The confession hung there, vulnerable, and before I could overthink it, he leaned in. Our lips met, tentative at first. A brush of memory, then deeper, hungrier, bourbon and longing mingling as the kiss reignited what time hadn't fully doused. We broke apart breathless, foreheads pressed together. This is crazy, I murmured. But my body arched toward him, traitorous and true. Crazy good, he whispered, nuzzling my neck, his stubble grazing like a promise. We tumbled into it then, hands exploring familiar yet new terrain, clothes shedding like old skins on the couch. It was messy, urgent, fingers fumbling buttons, laughs muffled against shoulders, but underneath, a tenderness that spoke of second chances. Blake moved like he was mapping me anew, every touch an apology, every gasp an absolution. Afterward, tangled in blankets that smelled of him, I traced the tattoos snaking up his arm. A compass rose on his bicep, needle pointing north. What's this for? I asked, voice slurred with satiation. You, he said simply, kissing my temple. The direction I should have taken. Sleep came easy after that, his heartbeat a lullaby against my back. But dawn brought clarity and complications. My phone, resurrected, lit up with Jake's texts. We need to talk. I'm sorry. Where are you? Guilt twisted in my gut as Blake stirred, murmuring my name in his sleep. This wasn't just a rebound, it was resurrection. But resurrections came with ghosts, and mine were already knocking. By noon, we'd ventured out for bagels at the corner deli, grease-proof paper crinkling as we walked back hand in hand, the autumn sun slanting gold through the leaves. New York felt different that morning, less predatory, more possible. What now? I asked, bumping his shoulder. We gonna do this? For real? He stopped, turning me to face him under the shadow of a mural depicting intertwined hands in rainbow hues. Hell yes. But slow, Zach. No rushing the encore. Dates. Coffee. The boring shit that builds empires. I grinned, pulling him into a kiss that tasted like sesame seeds and tomorrow. Deal. But as we climbed the stairs, my phone rang, Jake's face on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Blake's secret had changed everything, but secrets had a way of multiplying. And I had one of my own, the letter in my bag. The one from my lawyer about the settlement from that car wreck 3 years back. The one that could upend it all if Blake ever knew I'd been the reason his dad had crashed that night. Drunk, raging about his faggot son, swerving into traffic. I shoved the thought down, locking it away. For now, this was enough. But lies, like rain, had a way of seeping in. The next 2 weeks blurred into a montage of stolen moments that felt ripped from some indie rom-com, except with more grit and fewer tidy resolutions. Blake's shifts ended late. Mine started early with rehearsals for a new play downtown, but we'd carve out pockets of time like thieves. Midnight slices at that 24-hour pizzeria in Bed-Stuy, where the cheese stretched like our conversations. Lazy Sundays in McCarran Park, sprawled on a blanket with craft beers and playlists of the national crooning our soundtrack. Quiet evenings on his fire escape, sharing smokes and stories as the skyline twinkled like it approved. He was different from Jake in every way that mattered, rougher around the edges, but with a steadiness that anchored me. No spreadsheets or status updates. Just him, showing up with takeout from the halal cart when I forgot to eat, or leaving notes in my script margins. This line? Pure you. Break a leg. Killer. It was the small stuff that undid me, peeling back the cynicism I'd armored myself with. For the first time since Ohio, I let myself believe in us, not as a rebellion against small-town scorn, but as two men choosing each other in a city that didn't give a damn. Jake, meanwhile, had gone radio silent after a curt, "take care" text, which stung less than it should have. Closure by ghosting poetic, in a fucked up way. I boxed up his stuff, shipped it to his office, and felt the weight lift. Freedom tasted like Blake's coffee, black and bold. But cracks started showing around week 3, subtle at first like fault lines before the quake. It was a Thursday, rain lashing the windows of the tiny theater in Soho where I was directing a queer ensemble piece called Fractured Vows. Rehearsal ran long, actors bickering over blocking like it was life or death. By the time I emerged, soaked and frayed, Blake was waiting curbside in his Camry, wipers on intermittent. "Hop in, soaked rat," he teased, tossing me a towel from the passenger seat. Heard the forecast called for drama. I slid in, grateful, pressing a kiss to his cheek that lingered. "You have no idea." Elena's ad-libbing again. Turns the heartbreak scene into a goddamn TED Talk. He laughed, pulling into the snarl of Broadway traffic. "Sounds about right. Artists, man. Always overcomplicating the script." His tone was light, but his eyes in the mirror were tired, shadows deepening under them. "Picked up a double shift today. Tourist from Texas puked in the footwell. Smells like barbecue regret back there. Sorry, babe." I reached over, squeezing his thigh. "Crash at mine tonight? I've got that queen bed you pretend to hate." Tempting. He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. We rode in easy quiet until a pothole jarred us, and his phone buzzed on the dash. An unknown number, voicemail icon flashing. He glanced at it, jaw tightening, then swiped it away. "Everything okay?" I asked, casual as I could muster. "Yeah, just spam." But the lie hung there, thin as the rain veil on the windshield. I let it slide. Trust was a muscle, after all, and we were still warming up. That night, tangled in my sheets on the Upper East Side, Jake's old lease, a perk I couldn't quite quit, Blake made love to me like he was memorizing every inch. Slow and deliberate, whispers of mine against my skin. Afterward, as he dozed, I slipped out to the kitchen for water, my bare feet cold on the hardwood. That's when I saw it. His phone on the counter, screen lighting up with another text. I wasn't snooping, swear to God, but the preview popped before I could look away. Blake, we need to talk about the accident. Dad's estate, it's complicated. Call me. Mom, my blood ran cold. Accident. Dad. The pieces slotted in with sickening clarity. Blake's father, mine's best friend from the VFW hall, the one who'd preached fire and brimstone about sodomites until it broke him. The crash 3 years ago, ruled a DUI, but whispers in Ohio said it had started with a fight. Over Blake. And me. I set the glass down hard, heart pounding. Had Blake known? Been there? The letter from my lawyer burned in my memory. Mr. Ellis, the estate settlement includes a clause. Your father's role in the altercation preceding the incident. I signed it away, buried it, because guilt was easier to carry alone. But if Blake's family was circling back, mourning brought avoidance. He left early for a fare to JFK, kissing me sloppy and sweet. Love you, Zach. Talk later, I nodded, faking a smile, and spent the day in a fog of callbacks and coffee, the script's fractured vows mocking me from the page. By evening, paranoia had set in. I texted him nothing. Called no answer. At 10 p.m., I hailed my own Uber to Bushwick, the driver a chatty woman from Queens who mistook my silence for jet lag. Blake's building loomed dark, his window a blank eye. I buzzed anyway, heart in my throat. The door clicked open after an eternity. He stood there in sweats, hair mussed, eyes red-rimmed. Zach? What? We need to talk. I echoed his phantom text, pushing past into the dim apartment. The air was thick with stale takeout and unspoken shit. About your dad. The accident. His face drained of color. How? Saw the text. Don't lie to me, Blake. Not after everything. He sank onto the couch, head in hands. Fuck. I didn't want you dragged into this. It's ancient history. 3 years ago isn't ancient. My voice cracked, the dam breaking. My dad was there that night. They fought, over us, over you coming out. He drove off drunk, wrapped around a pole. I got the settlement papers, buried them because I blamed myself. For loving you. For not stopping it. Blake looked up, horror etching his features. Wait, your dad? He was the one calling my mom? Jesus. Zach. He stood, pacing like a caged wolf. I didn't know he died. Mom just said Dad's will's being contested. Some clause about moral debts. I thought it was about me leaving the disownment. Not this. The room spun. Moral debts. That's what the lawyer had called it. A payout to rectify harms. Vague enough to haunt. What if it's connected? I whispered. What if they blame me? Us, for pushing him over the edge? Blake stopped, pulling me into his arms, fierce and unyielding. Then we face it together. No more running. But even as he held me, doubt gnawed. That night, as we lay awake staring at the ceiling, his phone buzzed again. This time, he answered, voice low in the dark. Mom? Yeah, it's me. Tell me everything. I pretended to sleep, but fragments pierced the veil. The boy. Ellis Kid. Your fault. Betrayal bloomed, slow and venomous. Whose secret was unraveling now? And would it tear us apart before we even began? The next day shattered it all. Rehearsal called, but I bailed, wandering the High Line instead. Those elevated tracks turned park, where wildflowers pushed through concrete like stubborn hope. Blake texted, meeting mom at a diner in Midtown. 2 p.m. Come. I went. The diner was a relic, chrome stools, checkered floors, waitresses with beehives and no-nonsense attitudes. Blake waved me over to a booth in the back, where a woman with his eyes and gray-streaked hair nursed a coffee. Zachary, she said, extending a hand cool as the Formica. Blake's told me. Stories. Lies. Mostly, he joked weakly, but tension wired the air. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Your father's will, contested by his brother, claims the crash was suicide, not accident. Blames lifestyle influences. Her lip curled on the word. Including you too. Wants the estate voided unless we renounce. Associations. My stomach dropped. Renounce. As if love was a clause to cross out. That's blackmail, I spat. Legal. Unfortunately, she sighed. But there's a loophole. The settlement your family got ties it together. If we fight, it goes public. Names, dates. The whole ugly truth. Blake's hand found mine under the table, squeezing. We won't let them win, Ma. Zach and I were endgame. She studied us, then nodded, a tear tracing her cheek. Then fight. For the boys my husband couldn't be. Relief flooded, but as we left, her parting words chilled. Be careful, Zachary. Some debts demand payment. That night, Blake and I fortified, Chinese from the spot on Knickerbocker, binging old queer flicks on his laptop, laughing through the fear. But in the quiet hours, as he slept, I Googled the lawyer's name from the envelope. One hit. A blog post, anonymous, railing against the sins that killed my brother. Attached photo. Blake's dad, arm around a younger man. Not Blake. Someone else. The secret multiplied. Blake had a half-brother, outed, abandoned, and the crash tied to that. Not us. I deleted the history, curled against him. But the worm was in the apple, and paradise was fraying. November crept in with a vengeance. Crisp winds stripping the trees bare, mirroring the way secrets had started to flay us raw. Rehearsals for Fractured Vows intensified, the cast channeling our offstage turmoil into scenes of lovers torn asunder by family edicts and societal knives. Elena cornered me one night post-run-through, her eyeliner smudged from a monologue that had left us all gutted. You're channeling, director. This shit's too real. Spill. Who's the villain in your script? I deflected with a laugh. But she wasn't wrong. Blake and I were a powder keg, lit by that diner meeting. We'd thrown ourselves into the fight. Lawyers consulted via Zoom. Affidavits drafted in coffee-fueled marathons at my place. His mom, Lorraine, became an unlikely ally, her Midwestern pragmatism cutting through the bullshit like a plow through snow. Boys, she'd say over three-way calls, love's the only inheritance worth a damn. The rest is just paper, but paper cuts deep. Blake's shifts amped up to cover retainers, leaving him hollow-eyed and short-tempered. I catch him staring at his phone, thumb hovering over delete for voicemails from his uncle, the contesting shadow, a retired cop with a grudge and a badge's worth of pull. He wants blood, Blake confessed one night, sprawled on my couch after a particularly brutal hailstorm had flooded Bushwick basements. Says Dad's rolling in his grave because of me. Of us. I pulled him close, our bodies fitting like puzzle pieces weathered but true. Let him. We're not the sinners here. But doubt whispered, what if we were? My own buried guilt over the settlement. That payout I'd taken. Silent. While Blake grieved alone. Festered like an untreated wound. The climax hit on a Friday. The kind of gray-skied afternoon where the city felt like it was holding its breath. I was mid-rehearsal, blocking the betrayal scene, Elena's character discovering her lover's hidden letters, when my phone exploded. Texts from Lorraine, 911. Midtown Precinct. Now, heart in my throat. I bolted, hailing a cab that crawled through gridlock like molasses. Blake's uncle had made his move, a welfare check on Lorraine, badges flashing accusations of fraud in the will contest. But it was a ploy to drag Blake in, force a confrontation on neutral ground. I arrived to chaos. Lorraine in the lobby, composed but pale, flanked by a public defender who looked fresh out of law school. Blake burst through the doors minutes later, rain-slicked and wild-eyed, spotting me like a lifeline. Zach! Here! I grabbed his hand, steadying us both as his uncle loomed in an interrogation room doorway, all bulldog jowls and cheap polyester suit. Nephew, he barked, voice echoing off linoleum. Time to man up. Your perversions killed my brother. Time to confess. The word detonated. Blake surged forward, but I held him back, nails digging crescents into his palm. Not like this, I hissed. Lorraine stepped up, voice steel. Enough, Harlan. Your brother's shame was his own, hiding a son he couldn't face, just like you hide behind that badge. The room froze. Son? Harlan's face twisted, denial warring with defeat. Lies. Dad was straight as they come. Ask the letters. Lorraine cut in, slapping a folder onto the reception desk. The ones he wrote to that boy in Cincinnati. Your half-brother, Harlan. The one Dad paid off to disappear. That's the moral debt, not these boys' love. Harlan snatched the folder, flipping through faded ink and yellowed envelopes, his bluster crumbling to ash. This changes nothing, but it did. Everything. Blake's dad hadn't crashed over us. He'd been unraveling for years, secrets upon secrets, a closet so deep it swallowed him whole. We spilled out onto the street as dusk fell, the uncle slinking away with tail between legs, the contest hanging by a thread. Blake sagged against a lamppost, the fight draining out. All this time, I thought it was me. Us. I cupped his face, thumbs brushing tears mixing with rain. It was never you, babe. Never us. Just men too scared to live true. Lorraine hugged us both, fierce and fleeting. Go home. Deal. I've got the lawyers. She hailed a cab, vanishing into the traffic like a guardian angel with a smoker's cough. We walked then miles, it felt like, through the Diamond District's glittering hush, hands clasped, silence a bomb. By the time we reached my building, exhaustion had woven into something softer, clarity. In the elevator, Blake pinned me gently against the mirrored wall, kissing me with a desperation born of survival. I love you, he murmured against my lips. Through wrecks and wills and all the bullshit. Love you more, I breathed. The words a vow. But betrayal's shadow lingered. That night, as we made love, slow, reverent, reclaiming what fear had stolen, I confessed my own secret, the settlement, the guilt. He held me after, whispering, "We're even now. No debts left." Yet dawn brought the knife. Jake, of all people, showed up at my door, eyes haunted, a manila envelope clutched like a grenade. "Zach, I know about the will. Harlan's my uncle. On my mom's side, the world inverted. Jake, with his kale smoothies and safe silences, blood kin to the monster we'd just slain? What the fuck?" I choked. Blake appearing behind me, towel slung from the shower, confusion hardening to ice. "I didn't know," Jake pleaded, shoving the envelope at us. "Not until Lorraine called my mom last week. I tried to warn you, those texts, but you blocked me." Harlan's unhinged. He used me to get close, fed me lies about Blake being the villain. Blake snatched the papers, emails, dated months back. Jake's replies tentative at first, then complicit. "I'll keep an eye on him." Betrayal, layered and lacerating. "You spied on us?" Blake roared, voice breaking. "For family? After everything?" Jake's face crumpled. "I was scared of losing you both. But I ended it, swear. That's why I pulled away. Couldn't stomach the game." I staggered back, the pieces fracturing. Jake's space. His sudden coldness, not doubt, but divided loyalties. "Get out," I whispered, the door slamming like finality. Blake paced, fury coiling. "He used you, Zach. Played us both. Worse, it fit. The anonymous tips to the tabloids last year. Sniffing around my play for scandal. Jake's connections. His whispers in the right ears. "I need air," I gasped, grabbing my coat. "Zach, wait." But I was gone, pounding pavement through Central Park skeletal woods, leaves crunching underfoot like brittle trust. Hours later, I ended up at the reservoir, city lights fracturing on the water like shattered vows. My phone stayed silent, no calls, no pleas. Just me, reckoning with the men who'd shaped me, one who'd fled from love, one who'd weaponized it, and Blake, the one who'd returned to redeem it. By midnight, I hailed an Uber, not Blake's, some faceless avatar, and directed it to Bushwick. The door opened before I knocked. Blake silhouetted, wrecked. "I'm sorry," we said in unison, collapsing into each other. "Forgive me?" he asked, later, as we lay spent and staring at the fan's lazy spin. Always, I lied, because the hurt was fresh, but so was the love. Human frailty demanded grace, even when it burned. Winter clamped down hard after that, a polar vortex of ice storms and blackouts that mirrored the freeze in our veins. The will contest dragged into December, Harlan folding under the weight of Lorraine's evidence, the half-brother unearthed in Ohio, a quiet accountant with dad's eyes and a lifetime of suppressed grief. No headlines, no scandals, just a quiet settlement, the estate split clean, debts paid in dollars and denials. Jake vanished from the periphery, a final email apologizing, forwarding contacts for a therapist specializing in familial fractures. I deleted it unread, but the scar remained, a reminder that love's battlefield left shrapnel. Blake and I rebuilt brick by careful brick. Therapy became our ritual, Joint sessions in a sunlit office overlooking the East River, where a soft-spoken shrink named Ravi unpacked our Ohio ghosts without judgment. Trauma bonds you, he'd say, but choice frees you. We chose date nights at the Stonewall Inn, toasting pioneers with Manhattans, holidays with Lorraine, who arrived bearing pierogies and a noble shit wisdom that filled the holes her husband had punched. Men are like bridges, she'd quip over mulled wine. Built for crossing, not burning. My play premiered on a snowy January eve. Fractured vows packing a house of critics and queer kin into the Soho space. Blake sat front row, his presence a talisman as the lights rose. Elena's final soliloquy, rewritten in the aftermath, a plea for redemption amid ruins, drew gasps, then thunderous applause. Backstage, amid flowers and champagne flutes, Blake pulled me into the wings, kissing me fierce. You did it, Zach. Echoes of us, but better. The reviews called it a humanist triumph, raw romance in the face of ruin. Offers trickled in workshops, residencies, but I turned most down, craving the slow burn of us over spotlights. Blake quit Uber for a steady gig driving for a nonprofit, shuttling at-risk youth to pride centers and counseling. His easy ear now a lifeline for kids like we'd been. Feels right, he'd say, coming home with stories of breakthroughs, not barf. Spring thawed the ice, literally and otherwise. We sublet my Upper East Cave, pooling for a one-bedroom in Greenpoint, waterfront views of the Manhattan skyline, a balcony for morning coffees and evening joints. The move was chaos. Boxes labeled in Sharpie, books, Zach's therapy. Arguments over whose vinyl collection dominated the shelf. But in the unpacking, we found rhythm, him cooking chili while I strung fairy lights, our laughter echoing off fresh paint. One April afternoon, fat bumblebees drunk on cherry blossoms, Blake proposed, not on bended knee with a ring, but over falafel in Domino Park. A paper napkin scribbled with a compass rose mirroring his tattoo. Marry me? He asked, eyes hazel bright. Not for papers or picnics, but because you're my north. I said yes with a kiss that tasted like tahini and tears, the East River lapping agreement at our feet. No grand gestures, just us, registering quietly at City Hall. Lorraine and Elena as witnesses, toasting with bodega bubbly on the steps. But humanism isn't Hollywood. It's the grit between the highs. Jake resurfaced in June, a chance encounter at a pride march, rainbow flag slung over his shoulder, eyes wary but warm. Heard about the wedding. Happy for you. No groveling, just a nod to the man he'd become, out, openly, volunteering at the same youth center as Blake. We shook hands, the betrayal's edge dulled to a scar. Take care, I said, and meant it. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It was freeing space for more love. Summer brought heat waves and honeymoons on a budget, a road trip upstate, tent pitched by Finger Lakes, where we swam naked under star-pricked skies, echoing that barn mural from youth. Love wins, Blake murmured one night, fireflies winking approval. Yet the deepest cut healed slowest. My guilt over the settlement, reframed in therapy as survivor's tax, not sin. Blake held space for it, never pushing, until one bonfire-lit evening, he burned the last letter in the flames. Ashes to origins, he said, pulling me close. We're the story now. By fall, our first anniversary, we stood on that same Ohio field, ghosts revisited. The barn long raised for condos, but the ground remembered. Lorraine joined, scattering petals where we'd painted our defiance. To the boys who stayed true, she toasted, and we drank to it, the wind carrying away the last echoes. New York reclaimed us at dusk. The Camry traded up to a Subaru, practical as us humming south on I-80. Blake's hand on my knee, radio crooning Springsteen. Tramps like us, baby, we were born to run, but we weren't running anymore. We'd circled back, secrets spilled, to a life woven from the threads of what broke us. In the rear view, America unspooled, fields giving way to interstates, cities pulsing with possibility. Our story wasn't epic triumph or tragic fall. It was the quiet revolution of two men choosing tenderness over terror, day by ordinary day. Human, flawed, and fiercely alive. As the skyline rose, Blake glanced over, grinning that crooked grin. Ready for Act 2? With you, I squeezed his hand. Always, and in that always, we found our unforgettable. Not the ride that started it, but the road we'd paved together.